Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa-chanūramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. So, we are studying the Bhagavad Gita and 12th chapter. We have begun the 12th chapter, which is a particularly beloved chapter. It discusses Bhakti Yoga, the way of devotion. We had just started, and in the beginning of the 12th chapter, it begins with a question. Arjuna asks a question to Krishna, that you have taught me two paths, the path of knowledge and the path of devotion. The path of seeking the formless, attributeless, absolute Brahman, and the path of love and devotion and surrender to the personal God. So both are yogis. One is a jnana yogi, the yogi on the path of knowledge. The other one is a bhakti yogi, the yogi on the path of devotion. But which of them is a greater yogi? Who knows yoga better? Or to put it even more directly, which is the better path? He's asking that. This kind of a question, and especially Sri Krishna's response, puts the classical non-dualist in trouble. In fact, the classical non-dualist would say that there's only one path. You have to realize that you are the absolute, you are that. And devotion to God can help you at best, but it can't be an alternative. That either you love God and attain to God realization through that path, or you inquire into who am I and attain to enlightenment through this path. One of the two. It can't be that way. So the classical non-dualist will try to, classical Advaitin will try to straitjacket you into one path. That is, yes, you are welcome to, and it's highly recommended that you cultivate devotion to God, and from there you must proceed to the path of self-knowledge, the knowledge that you are Brahman. Krishna's response to this question, which is better, he not only validates the question, he says, yeah, it's a good question actually. And he says the path of devotion is better. So we saw that last time. He gave a short introduction to the path of devotion, and he said that's better. And today, we will see he explains. So he contrasts it with the path of knowledge, and then explains why it is more difficult. And then, after that, we won't get to it today, but from the verses after that, verses 3, 4, 5 are an explanation, a beautiful, concise explanation of the path of knowledge. What is the path of knowledge? What is it that you are seeking? What is the practice? And what do you get? All of that. And also, why is it difficult? And then from the 6th verse onwards to the end of this short chapter, 6th verse onwards to the end of this short chapter is a beautiful, wonderful teaching on the path of devotion. So that's what's ahead of us now. One monk put it very beautifully. There are only these two ways. He put it in Hindi. Jano ya mano. Do hi raste hain Mahatma ji. Jano ya mano. There are only two ways, O monk. Either you know it or you believe it. Of course, most of us start off by believing. But the path of knowledge is a path of inquiry. Not on believing something. Not on faith. But the path of faith is also an equally valid path. And it works. Sri Ramakrishna, alright, let's go a little bit more into this before we dive into it, into the verses themselves. There is a great master of classical non-dualism, Madhusudan Saraswati, who lived about 400-500 years ago. He has written some masterpieces on non-dual Vedanta. And he has written perhaps the most exhaustive commentary, not exhausting, but exhaustive commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, classical commentary. It's called Gudhartha Deepika, the lamp illumining profound knowledge. a lamp in illumining the profound intent, gurartha. There, in a commentary to the verses which we are going to start now, this question is raised, an objection is raised, that if the goal is the same, if the result is the same, then it stands to reason that you should take the easier path. So you're going to reach some place, and there are two ways of reaching it, or multiple ways of reaching it, and one of them is easier than the rest. Since all these paths are going to take you to the same destination, then it makes sense that you would take the easier path. Why would you unnecessarily court trouble? However, this is the objection to this whole discussion. The objection is, however, the goal is not the same. This is an objection from the non-dualist. The goal is not the same. By the path of non-dual knowledge, you investigate who am I or what am I, and denying or transcending body and senses and mind, not this, not this. You realize the one consciousness illumining all experiences in life, the undimmed, unflickering light, and you realize that as yourself. I am this. And that light itself is the ground of this entire universe. The whole universe appears and exists and disappears in that light. It has its existence, its sustenance, its support as that light which you discover yourself has. And that is the realization, I am Brahman. I am not the body, not the mind. I am limitless luminosity. And this limitless luminosity is also the ground of the entire universe. It's not just my real nature. It's the essence, the Atman, the ground of the entire universe. So you realize this. And then this sets you free from samsara and the travails of how it does. It's, you have to go deep into it. So this is the result you're looking for on the path of knowledge. This is moksha, freedom. On the path of devotion, this is all the person who's doubting this, who has a problem with this kind of thing. On the path of devotion, however, you worship the personal God. You worship Narayana or Vishnu or the incarnation of personal God like Krishna. And what will you get? What's the goal here? What's the end game? You develop devotion, perhaps you have mystical visions of God, you feel the presence of God, and after death, what do the texts promise you? You will go to the abode of God, heaven, and dwell there in eternal loving relationship with this God whom you have worshipped. That's the goal which is put forward by every theistic religion. Every religion which is a God-centered religion. But you have not realized the truth. You have not realized what that God is in reality, what this universe is in reality, and what you are in reality. That they are all three are the same. This world, Jagat, sentient beings, all sentient beings, us, all of us, and the God of this universe. All of them are nothing but the attributeless Brahman appearing in all these ways. Until you realize that, have you really attained moksha? Have you really attained, eternal freedom? Yes, you may go to an eternal heaven and you never have to be born again. In that sense, you have attained moksha. But you have not yet reached the final destination. So this is all an objection. And therefore, the goal reached by devotion and the goal reached by knowledge are not the same. The goal reached by devotion is inferior. The goal reached by knowledge is superior and ultimate. And therefore, the path of knowledge gives you a higher result. And therefore, it stands to reason that you have to put forth more effort. It's difficult, but it's difficult because it gives you a greater result. You see the argument here? No? Two paths leading you to the same goal. You would always take the easier path. But two paths leading you to different goals. One of them is much higher and better and the sort of the ultimate. Even if that path is a little more difficult, you would prefer that. Because you would want the best for yourself. So we are promising on the path of knowledge truth, realization, ultimate truth. There's nothing beyond non-duality. And so it's more difficult, yes, but that doesn't mean you have to follow the other path. This is the question. And Madhusudan Saraswati's answer there is interesting. I will contrast his answer with Sri Ramakrishna's answer. Madhusudan Saraswati there says, he upholds this logic, that the non-dual realization is higher than the dualistic realization. The realization that you are Brahman is higher and it's ultimate. The realization that I am a sentient being in love with God, in the presence of the divine, that's lower. The attributeless Brahman is the ultimate truth. The personal God is transitional. It's on the way. So he holds on to that. That's the classical Advaita perspective. But what he says is, no, it's not that the path of devotion is like training, is preliminary, is secondary, is inferior. No. Why not? Because, he explains, the path of devotion, when you purify yourself and turn away from worldliness and focus on God and love and worship and adore God and make God the center of your life, which is talked about here. Immerse yourself in the love of God. That transforms us so much and makes us so pure of all worldliness, all taint of worldliness, that at a point what will happen is, for this devotee who will feel the presence of God, who will inevitably get mystical experiences of God, who will feel the protection of God, also in addition will, because of the sheer purity and transformation which has taken place within himself or herself, the Vedantic teaching which this person presumably already has, the training, having attended many Vedanta talks and listened to many YouTube talks and come to classes, that knowledge will at some point or the other flash. You can say, by the grace of God to whom you are devoted, by the inner sheer force of your devotional practices, by your inner transformation, even if you do not want it, that non-dual knowledge, it will come to you. You will get it. And so not only you will have devotion, not only the presence of God, not only after death you may go to heaven, but before death or after physical death, at some point you will get the non-dual knowledge also. So that higher result, I admit, he says, it's a higher result, but the higher result is also available to you. So you will get it. So notice he has accepted the paradigm of the questioner. The questioner's paradigm is devotion, personal God is lower, knowledge and realization I am Brahman is higher. One takes you to that path. That path takes you to the realization of that I am the absolute. This path takes you to a devotion to God and faith on God. Maybe you go to heaven after death. And so that path is better. He says, no, this path also will give you that result. This result plus that result. So this is the answer. And this answer is generally accepted by classical non-dualists to this day. If you see the monks and the practitioners in India, those who are non-dualists, you will find they're also devotees. They're also devotees. I have seen myself, one of the most radical non-dual monks I met, he would proudly say, I'm half an atheist, Swami. Main to aadha nastik ho, Mahatma ji. So he was so apparently dismissive of all rituals, forms, all devotion to personal God. And yet, and in his little cottage, there was nothing. There were no pictures of gods and goddesses. Curiously, though, there was a picture of the Holy Mother. Though he does not belong to our tradition, somehow. But I asked him, all right, so he was this strict non-dualist. However, one day I chanced to enter his cottage for some work. I went in unannounced because he didn't open when I knocked. So I opened, the door was open, so I pushed it open. Little cottage, just about this big, right on the Bhagirathi, when the Ganga comes down from the glacier, there. This is about 10,000, 11,000 feet high in the Himalayas, which is not too high, by the way. It's about 1/3 the way up Mount Everest. So he was sitting, I still remember, I was so taken aback to see him in a corner on his bed, wrapped with a blanket around himself and sitting ramrod straight and repeating. He had the mantra, or I think if he had rosary, or I don't remember, but he was repeating the mantra. So I quickly left the place. I asked another monk, I remember, an old Punjabi monk, I asked him, but that Swami, I thought he was a strict non-dualist and had nothing to do with personal devotion. And that old Punjabi monk, he said to me, "Arey, wo to chupa Rustam hai." How do I translate that? He is a hidden master or a secret master. That means there is a secret side to him, which is a personal devotion, love of God, which he denies on the surface. So that's the classical approach. Now there's one more approach. I'll just mention that and dive into this. The approach of Sri Ramakrishna. So the classical Advaita approach also might not appeal to. Suppose there are many schools of Vedanta which are non-dualist, which are not non-dualistic. Some are dualistic. If you say to a devotee of Krishna, somebody on the path of Vishishtadvaita, a devotee of Narayana, somebody on the path of, say, Achintya-bheda, Gaudiya Vaishnavism, the schools of Vaishnavism, a devotee of Krishna or of Rama, that, oh, it's not bad, what you're doing is really good. You will get devotion to God and finally you will achieve the much vaunted non-dual knowledge. He might just as well say to you, I don't want your non-dual knowledge. I couldn't care less. I love my God and I want to be with God forever and ever and ever. I want to maintain my individuality and love God and enjoy the bliss of love of God. Sri Ramakrishna asked Swami Vivekananda, there is a bowl of nectar, and suppose you were a bee or a fly or something, what would you do? Would you sip the nectar or would you jump into the bowl of nectar? And Vivekananda said, oh, if I jump in, I'll die. I'll just sit very carefully on the edge of the bowl and sip the nectar. And Sri Ramakrishna smiled and said, oh, but this is the nectar of immortality. You won't die if you jump into it. You'll become immortal. So both ways. Do you want to become sugar or do you want to taste sugar? These are the two ways. Sri Ramakrishna says, in either way you are experiencing that ultimate reality. See, non-dualism privileges the non-dualistic knowledge above the dualistic knowledge, above the dualistic devotion. So you have devotion to God, that's very good, but please progress further and realize you and that God are one reality. You are not the body-mind, God is also not the personal God. There is one absolute existence, consciousness bliss, which you are. But for those who do not like that path or not drawn to it, classical Advaita would seem to insist, but you have to come to non-duality in the end. I've seen devotees say that, isn't that true, Swami? But that's the classical Advaita path. The dualistic path, the devotee's path, is not that you have to come to non-duality at the end. They may even deny that there's no point in non-duality. There are some schools of Vaishnava Vedanta who will say this so-called idea of non-duality is false. There is no non-dual Brahman. There is only God. They stop at that. And they stop at that not because they are lower, they stop at that because their framework, their theology does not permit an attributeless Brahman. Or there are other schools of Vaishnava Vedanta which say that your so-called attributeless Brahman, we admit it, that's lower actually. He says there are some fools, I'm quoting from them now, there are some fools who experience this radiance, a formless radiance, and they lose consciousness there and they think they have attained the highest. But if they would only persist, they would realize what they experienced was just the light of the body of Krishna. The light emanating, they call it tanubha, the light emanating from the radiance emanating from the body of Krishna. If they would just persist a little further in their devotions, in their meditation, in their surrender to Krishna, they would see beyond that so-called light which they call limitless consciousness or whatever. Beyond that, they would find a little blue boy standing with a flute and with a peacock feather. So what they do is, either they will deny your non-dual Brahman, or they'll make that non-dual Brahman lower than the personal God. So ultimately, personal God has to be realized. And Sri Ramakrishna says, that's also fine. It's not lower. So whether you realize the non-dual Brahman, whether you realize the dualistic God of love, in either way, you have touched reality. And you will be free. So that's the broadest kind of approach. All right, so all that's background. Now we get into it. Please, we have done the first one and we are in the second verse. Please chant after me. Arjuna vacha, Arjuna vacha, evam satata yuktaye, evam satata yuktaye bhaktāstvam paryupāsate bhaktāstvam paryupāsate ye chāpyakṣharam avyaktaṁ ye chāpyakṣharam avyaktaṁ tesham ke yoga vittamaha tesham ke yoga vittamaha. So this was the question asked by Arjuna. Between those who worship you, God, the personal God, and those who worship the imperishable, unmanifest, who knows yoga better? And then the answer by Krishna. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Mayyaveshya mano yemam Mayyaveshya mano yemam Nitya yukta upasate Nitya yukta upasate Shraddhaya parayopeta Shraddhaya parayopeta Te me yukta tamamataha Te me yukta tamamataha. Straight answer. Those who have devotion to God are superior. Throwing all of us non-dualists into a flurry of commentary. What he means by this is actually footnotes and explanations. So I had already discussed this last time, but a couple of points before we go on. He says, Shraddhaya paraya peta. They have the highest Shraddha. The word Shraddha, it's translated as faith. But faith is kind of inadequate English translation. Shraddha is very deep. Shraddha is belief, faith. It's a grasp on something that you don't know yet, but it's real. So you can grasp reality by knowing it. Or if you don't know it yet, but you can grasp reality by Shraddha. The deeper, if you investigate into the meaning of the word Shraddha in an Advaitic sense, a non-dual sense, Sat, it comes from Sat. Sat means pure being, existence, isness itself. And in a paroksha sense, the Sanskrit word is paroksha. Paroksha means distant or indirect. That I am that attributeless being that is not clear yet. I have read about it, I've heard about it, but it's not a matter of knowledge for me yet. I can't say I know it. I can't say I know it. I read about it, heard about it, studied it, tried to reason about it, but I can't say I know it. But I firmly believe it is so. So that is a grasp, an indirect grasp on that ultimate reality. This is called Shraddha. And we cannot progress in life in whatever endeavor unless you have this Shraddha. Whether you want to earn $1 million on Wall Street, whether you want to make a scientific breakthrough in a lab, whether you are writing a novel or painting a picture, everywhere there's a Shraddha that this is worthwhile, this will make my life better, it can be done, I can do it. All of these things are necessary. Otherwise you wouldn't start it, you wouldn't persist in it, and you won't see it through to the end. Shraddha is what gives us stability, energy, focus, and stamina to persist to the end in anything, any endeavor of life, especially in spiritual life. So Shraddha is important. In the Kathopanishad, we read about that little boy who went to the house of death and asked questions about what is reality, what exists after death, who am I really, to the Lord of Death. But the journey starts with Shraddha. The Kathopanishad says, Shraddha avivesha. Shraddha entered into that little boy. And the commentary there explains, Shraddha is astikya buddhi. Astikya buddhi means the conviction that it is so. All religion, theistic religion, depends on it is so, faith. How do you know? The atheist will ask, the agnostic will ask. I don't know, but I believe. I don't know yet, but I believe. And that belief, if it's deep and strong, it is very close to knowledge. Not yet knowledge. One must be very clear there. Swami Vivekananda gave great emphasis on Shraddha. It was that Shraddha. It's very important. It's a kind of, nowadays in airlines and all, you have pre-boarding. This is sort of pre-boarding for heaven. This Shraddha, you have to have a grasp on it. It's not imagination, it's not just kind of blind belief, no. Without this, one cannot progress in spiritual life. It's what distinguishes a person who investigates spiritual life seriously. I want to do this. And another person who is not interested or just curious. This Shraddha distinguishes. So, Shraddhaya Paraya Peta. See, the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, at a time when Sri Ramakrishna had already passed away, when many people came to become monks or they became devotees, they would praise these newcomers. They would say, we saw him and we are sold. We are, we have become his. But you have not seen him. You have read about him. You have heard about him. And still you have come. How wonderful you all are. What are they praising? Shraddha. Praising the Shraddha. Then, just a comment on the word yukta. It comes up again and again and again throughout. Yukta, the word yukta. Arjuna used it in his question, and Krishna also uses this word. Nitya yukta, yukta tama. Yukta is the same root as yoga, a path to realization. And yukta means connected, centered in, tuned into. Many words are there in American English. Clued in. You are clued in, others are clueless. So yukta, centered in. Now, this word has been used a number of times throughout the Gita. Some of the most important ones I'll just mention. This gives us an idea of what true spirituality is. So the word comes up, for example, in the 8th verse of the 6th chapter. I bookmarked it here. Chapter 6, 8th verse. What is yukta? What does it consist in? The 8th verse of chapter 6, which we have done already. Jnana vijnana triptatma kūṭa-stham vijitendriya yukta ityuchyate yogi samaloshtāśmakanchanaha. It says the yogi who is fulfilled by knowledge and realization. So what is knowledge? Spending your time in listening, studying, reasoning and meditating. Shravana, manana, nididhyasana, the three components of the non-dual path. Spending your time in devotion, in reading the lives of the saints, of the enlightened beings, in devotional practices, in japa, in worship, bhakti yoga. Spending your time in meditation, calming the mind in meditation morning and evening. Spending your time in service, in a temple, ashram, at your home, or to, in a secular sense, to people who need service, need help. Karma yoga. So this is, you're fulfilled by spiritual practices and also by the realization. Vijnana means, commentator says, aparoksha anubhava. Direct experience, God experience. It could be in a mystical sense, of a devotional sense of the presence of God. Many mystics feel the presence of God. You might say, isn't that imagination? No, if you ask them, that's more real than this world. That's more real than this world. What you call real world is for them, you are sleepwalking. You are not even in touch with reality. So, direct presence of God. Or those who are on the non-dual path, the realization, first time, the clarity, unshakable clarity, you see for the first time, oh, I am actually not this body. I am actually not even this mind. This body is there, senses are there, mind is there. But I am the one existence, a light, which is and which shines. This clarity, this is called vijnana. And the yogi, the spiritual master, the practitioner is tripta, is triptatma, is fulfilled. This is the sign of spirituality, the sign of yukta, tuned in, that does not go around with begging bowl to the world for fulfillment. I want fulfillment. Yes, I'm spiritual. I study and I meditate, but I also want fulfillment from, from friends, from social media, from merrymaking, from food and outings and activities, whatever, the 100 different things, job and career. Those are the places I'm looking for fulfillment. No, this person will not. Will be completely fulfilled, deeply happy. Triptatma. Then you are yukta. That is the one meaning of yukta. Then another meaning you find in the 5th chapter, 23rd verse. And also it says, samaloshtāśma kanchana, in the 8th verse of 6th chapter. This yogi regards gold and a clod of clay and a stone as the same. That the gold has no particular value for this person compared to the clod of clay or something. Then the 23rd verse of the 5th chapter. Shaknoti ihaiva yasodam praksharira vimokshanat kama krodhodbhavam vegam sa yukta sa sukhi nara. The one who in this very life is able, at this moment, is able to withstand the waves, the impulses of passion and anger. Praksharira vimokshanat, before the death of this body. That means here in this life. And the powerful impulses rule us. I understand everything, Swami, but at that moment I can't control myself. Somebody misbehaves, I feel furious. The yogi is the one who's able to restrain the impulse at that moment. Is not swept away by waves of anger and passion. So first of all, stop the reaction at the level of the body. Don't send that harsh text in reply. I'll give that fellow a piece of my mind. No, don't. If you can, stop it at that moment. Then a deeper one. Don't write that, don't say it. At a more subtle level, don't even allow the mind to be disturbed. Don't allow the serenity of your mind to be spoiled, to break out into waves. It's like mind is delicate. It's like a calm body of water. Don't let ripples arise in it. That's difficult. If you can do that on basis of what? On the basis of your spiritual realization. You are deeply fulfilled by your spiritual practices and by the presence of God. You do not look to the world for fulfillment, and nothing in the world has particular value for you compared to what you have already got. Then it's easier not to be upset by the world, not to be pulled. Terror and temptation, anxiety and anger, and anxiety and attraction. The world does these two things to us. Either it attracts us or it causes anxiety in us. Neither anxiety nor attraction, neither terror nor temptation. If you can withstand and not allow the mind to. And if one cannot do that, the next best thing is to recover quickly, as quickly as possible. Some people lose their temper, next moment they're calm and they relax, they're calm. Others lose their temper and they simmer and stew for days and weeks, sometimes for a lifetime. Cultivate enmities and carefully nurture grudges. No, never do that. It's a foolish thing to do. So the yogi, yukta, is centered. And then one more time yukta comes among the many times, is a very powerful verse in the 18th verse of the 4th chapter. Karmanya karmaya pashyet akarmani cha karmaya sabuddhiman manusheshu sayukta kritsna karma krit. The one who sees action in inaction and inaction in action. That sounds contradictory. When you're not acting, you're obviously not doing anything. No. The one who is clued in, the one who is tuned in, the one who is centered, sees that in the midst of the action, the body is doing all action, the tongue is speaking, the mind is thinking, I am doing nothing. I am that one light which illumines all the activities of the mind, the senses and the body. That light by itself does nothing. So if you are centered in that sense, he says, sayukta. Spirituality is not against action. You may be in a dynamo of action. You may be working in your career, in your community. You are doing a lot of spiritual practices also, various kinds. All of the action is going on, and that's wonderful. From your perspective, you are the witness, unaffected witness. If you can remain like that. Not easy, of course, but he says that's yukta. Then he uses the word yukta tamamataha. Krishna says, among all these yogis who are yukta, by their knowledge that I am Brahman, they are fulfilled by their spiritual practices and the realization that I am Brahman. That's one. Jnana vijnana triptatma. I have seen many such. Monks and senior devotees also. Yeah, come. There are lots of chairs. That's it. They're truly fulfilled by spirituality. One of the things which attracted me to become a monk, to spiritual life, was the sight of these monks in an ashram near our house. And I saw these monks, young and old. One thing was common to them, they didn't have anything. I noticed that my parents, they had each other, they were married, they had children, they had money, they had a status in society, they had relatives, they had things to do, a lot of religious things, but also lots and lots of secular things to do, and plans and projects in life, and so on and so forth. And they were not happy. I mean, if you ask them, they say, no, we were happy. I mean, all right, sort of, with some footnotes, happy with some. But then I saw these monks. They didn't have families. They didn't have a single rupee to their name. They had no property. They had the minimum of possessions, and they were happy. Not the smiley face all the time, but remarkably fulfilled and happy. How? This is a question that intrigued me. And of course, I liked the serenity, the purity, and the depth you felt in the monastery. But that happiness, jnana vijnana triptatma, spirituality fills you. Satisfaction of desires is not the way to happiness. That's a great, great lesson that we have to learn. That's a sign of maturity. Somerset Maugham, I've quoted him many times. Very beautifully he says, if you single-mindedly pursue pleasure, very soon you find nothing pleasing anymore. There's a story of the king Yayati in Sanskrit, a very well-known episode in Sanskrit Puranas and Sanskrit literature. This was a king who was getting old, and he thought, oh, I'm getting old and feeble. I can't enjoy, all the sense pleasures I used to. Like, he was a king. What can I do? So then he goes to his son, the prince, and he says, look, I'll strike a bargain with you. Can you give me your youth? I'll take your youth and you become old. And only for time being. So, and then I'll enjoy life to my heart's content, and I'll return your youth to you, and I'll take up the old age. His son was dutiful. He said, sure, Dad. And suddenly his son became middle-aged, and aging with all problems, and Yayati became young again. And what is that shop? Forever 21. He became young again. It is a very interesting name, but why every time I say it, everybody bursts out laughing. Why? But it is a very well-named shop. What is it selling? It's selling exactly what Yayati wanted to buy. Forever. He wanted to be 21 forever. Every one of us, what nature gives us at the age of 21, 19, 20, 21, all of our science and exercise and wellness practices and all of that is trying to hold on to that. One doctor said, Swami, with the kind of advances we have made, especially in the last 20, 30 years in medical science, we can sort of assure you will live long, but we can't assure you that you'll live well. And another doctor said, this is the dirty secret of medical science. After 40, it's all the way down. And If you live well, you will manage the downward slide. And if you do not live well, it will become a tumble down the hillside. But it's way down. You can only live well with effort after, and except unless you are one of those very rare people who have got very strong genes you are endowed with, you can have some amount of good health. So Yayati got his youth, and then he proceeded to enjoy, have as much fun as he wanted, and he was a king, so he got whatever he wanted. And so he enjoyed life for the next 1,000 years. Everything is 1,000 years. So the next 1,000 years. And then he found, after 1,000 years, after enjoying whatever he wanted, to the extent he wanted, to the quantity he wanted, to the variety he wanted, whatever he could think of, he was not satisfied. The cravings just kept on increasing. He did not have one moment of fulfillment. His mind had become even more restless. He realized, and the famous verse is there, that a fire, when you pour ghee, the oblation into it, clarified butter. When you pour clarified butter, that's how the Vedic Hindus used to perform rituals. When you pour that clarified butter, ghee into a fire, it blazes forth even more. A fire will not be put out if you pour fuel into it. Okay. Similarly, desires will not be quenched if you keep pouring sense objects into it. Whatever you want, you keep getting and putting it into that, it will not be quenched. So you have to step back from it and direct your energies, mind, senses, life to something higher. So then he went back to his son and he did the right thing. He returned his youth and took back his old age. Basically attained maturity. It's a very deep story. It shows the importance of accepting change and onward progress in life, not holding on to our culture over the last 50 years, I would say 60, 70 years, has become an infantile culture. It wants to freeze you, literally forever 21. And even if you are not, you cannot be frozen. But it wants to sell you a life that you can somehow live at that level and somehow desirable. It's neither desirable nor possible. It's not even desirable. It's idiotic. Children, we had wonderful time as children. We all look back nostalgically to childhood. Do you want to be a child again and go to grammar school? And no, that's horrible. You have grown out of it. You have become mature. Yukta tamamata. So, here Krishna says that among those who are yukta, who are clued, who are spiritual, who are satisfied with spirituality, who are able to withstand the waves of anger or passion, who are poised in spiritual consciousness in the midst of activity, in the midst of action, midst of doing their duties, going around in life. This wonderful person, among such persons also, the one who has deep devotion to God is yukta tama, the most clued in, the most centered, the best among them. And then he says, mata, this is my humble opinion. You can take it, leave it if you want. When he says it's my view, that's the time you have to be most alert, because he's telling us something very valuable there. All right, moving on. Now he comes back to a little explanation. Before teaching Bhakti Yoga, he's going to give us a little explanation of why did he say Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion, is superior. He says, so he will explain what is this other path, the path of knowledge. How do you do it? What are the practices? What will you get? And why is it difficult? Verses 3, 4 and 5. First 3 and 4 together. Such a concise and powerful explanation of the path of knowledge. 3. Ye tu akṣharam anirdeśhyam, ye tu akṣharam anirdeśhyam, avyaktaṁ paryupāsate, avyaktaṁ paryupāsate, sarvatra-gam achintyañcha, sarvatra-gam achintyañcha, kūṭa-stham achalandhruvam, kūṭa-stham achalandhruvam, sanniyamyendriya-grāmaṁ, sanniyamyendriya-grāmaṁ, sama-buddhayaḥ, sama-buddhayaḥ, te prāpnuvanti māmeva, te prāpnuvanti māmeva, sarva-bhūta-hite ratāḥ, sarva-bhūta-hite ratāḥ. But, so this but is to distinguish these people from the devotees. That's one group, this is another group. But they who worship the imperishable, indescribable, unmanifest, all-pervading, inconceivable, changeless, immovable, and eternal, controlling well their senses, even-minded everywhere, and devoted to the good of all beings, also attain me alone. They'll come to the same goal. All right. There's a lot packed into it. So the whole of Advaita Vedanta has been packed into this. I'm going to give you the TED Talk version of it in the next 10 minutes or so. Yeah, TED Talks, I've given two, one proper one not so proper one. The not proper one was on online when things were in COVID, But the real TED Talk which I gave, that was my first experience, long time back. These are called TEDx. That means they're like franchisee. You can take the whole, they give you the whole kit. And so I tell you TED Talks, I'll give you the TED Talk. Anyway, the only point there I made was, it's very difficult. In 18 minutes you have to finish saying whatever you're saying, and there's a clock ticking down from 18 to 0.0000 in hundredths of a second. It's like a 100-meter sprint. And there's a clock ticking up from counting up, not even ticking. They're big digital clocks on the floor. You can't see them on the computer, but the person who's speaking can see them. They're like huge screens on the floor. The one of them is counting up from 0 to 18. 0.0000 in hundredths of a second up to 18 minutes. And the third one is showing you, how you look. Because it's an internet event. It's all very distracting for me. So, so I'm racing against the clock here. All right. What are we talking about here? Akṣharam. The word akṣharam is used. The word akṣharam has multiple meanings. In Gita itself and in Upanishads, the word akṣharam has been used in multiple ways. Literally, it means that which does not decay, that which is imperishable. Those who know Indian languages know that akṣhara also means letters. The language, letters, alphabet. So they are known as akṣhara. All the Vedas, therefore, because they are made of letters, alphabets, they are known as akṣhara. And all of the Vedas are summarized in the Gayatri mantra. This is a saying in the Vedas. The Vedas, if you want to see the entire mass of literature, basically it's summarized in the Gayatri mantra. Those who have repeated it, they know Om Bhur-Bhuvasva Tat Savitur-Varenyam. Basically it means we contemplate that limitless consciousness which illumines the intellect, which illumines the mind right now. And the Gayatri mantra also can be condensed into the Mahavakya. You are that. Tattvamasi. Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman. And the Mahavakya, which is the essence of the Upanishads, which is basically Vedanta, that thou art, you are that. That also can be condensed further into one akshara, into one letter. Om. Om. Into this one sound. Om. So akshara, those who are focused or centered in the akshara, does it mean centered in Om? It could. Om is chanting Om, meditating in Om is a practice on the way of non-dual Vedanta. Yes. Another meaning of akshara is sentient beings. We are called akshara in the Bhagavad Gita. It's said that Brahman has these two natures. One is the ever-changing material nature. Other one is sentient beings. So the sentient beings are called akshara, and this entire material nature is called kshara. Prakriti or Maya is also called akshara. In the 15th chapter, we will see soon, there are 3 levels. One is called kshara purusha. That means the bodies which are ever born and aging and dying. And there is an akshara purusha at the level of Maya, at the level of Prakriti, nature itself. And beyond that is something called Purushottama. So that's in the 15th chapter. What I mean here is the word akshara is used in multiple senses. One sense is Om. It could mean Om. It could mean, very legitimately, it could mean us, akshara. It could mean Maya or Prakriti. But the sense in which it is used here is the fourth sense, which is the one you find those who are attending our Mundaka Upanishad classes, where the student asks the teacher, "Sir, what is that by knowing which everything is known? You know one thing and you know everything." And the teacher says there are two kinds of knowledge, the lower knowledge and the higher knowledge. Paravidya, paravidya. Lower knowledge, everything. The entire university syllabus is lower knowledge. Then what is the higher knowledge? Yaya para yaya tad akṣharam adhigamyate. The higher knowledge is that by which the akshara is reached. And throughout the Mundaka Upanishad, the word used for the ultimate reality, existence, consciousness, bliss, attributeless Brahman, Paramatma, whatever you call it, Godhead, the Absolute, is akshara. So, he says, those who are focused on the akshara, who want to realize the akshara, that's the real meaning. Anirdeśhyam, which cannot be expressed by language. Why can it not be expressed by language? I mentioned this a number of times earlier, but I'll do it TED Talk style. So language requires one of 5 factors to operate. This is the Vedantic theory of language. Language requires one of 5 factors to operate. Without any, if none of them are present, language cannot work. One is class or genus or species, jati. So cow is a class. You can use that class to designate this animal is a cow because there's a class of animals called cow. In any set, a member of a set. That's one way language operates. The second way language operates is through characteristics, qualities, adjectival. Table, but brown table. That's a black table. It's a brown table. So brown is a characteristic of the table. Table is a member of a class. But the brown is a characteristic of now you can say brown table to distinguish it from the black table. You have used a characteristic, a color. The tall man, the fast car, and things like that. The biggest planet. So you are using size or something, some characteristic. That is called guna. First one is called jati, second one is called guna. Third one, you can use action. Driver of a car, the cook of this dish, the speaker. So some action can be used. If some entity has some action, you can use it to speak about it. So third one is kriya. Fourth one is relation. You can talk about teacher, student, father, children. Relation. Relation can be used to use language to designate something. And the last one is, if nothing is present, you can just use conventional designation. In Sanskrit, it's called Rudi. Just call this person John or Stuart or Ram or Sita. Just name it. Just give it a name. It's not class or quality or action or relation. Nothing like that. It's just a name. That's how we've been named. But that also, so now these 5, any one of them, language can work. But none of them are present in that akshara. Akshara does not belong to a class of things. There's no class of set of absolute ultimate realities. There's only one non-dual ultimate reality. The ultimate non-dual reality is attributeless. Therefore, it has no attribute. That does no action at all. There's nothing happening there. So action cannot be used to designate it. Relationship requires at least 2. Dvinishtha sambandha. At least 2 entities are required to establish a relationship. There is no second. We just called it non-dual. Non-dual means there is no second apart from Brahman. So no relationship is possible with Brahman. And then can't you just name it? Use a term. Atman, Brahman, Absolute, whatever you call it. You can't. Because to name something, you must point out, designate. Anguli nirdesha in Sanskrit. Point out with your finger. This baby is henceforth going to be called Ram or Mary, this. If I just say, oh, he is Ramesh, you'll be puzzled. Who are you talking about, Swami? I won't tell you, but he is Ramesh. Have I been able to communicate? No, communication has failed. I know what I mean, but you don't know what I mean. So the enlightened one can use language like Atman, Brahman, that you are, and all of that. And it has clear meaning for that person. Even without using any words, it has clear meaning for that person. But for the rest of us, it has no meaning because it fails to designate. If I say, your real nature, not body, not mind, we understand, but your real nature, witness consciousness, at that part, Swami, I can't follow that. Come again, I didn't quite follow you there. Language fails there. So that point being, anirdeśhyam, not designated by language. All of this was meant to point that out. Avyaktaṁ, unmanifest. Unmanifest how? It's not something that can, the absolute reality is not something that can be seen with the eyes, it cannot be heard, smelled, tasted, touched. Also, by the extension of our senses, it's not something that can be detected with a telescope or a microscope, no matter how powerful. You can put up the telescope. What's that one in space, the most powerful one they have put up? James Webb. I saw a documentary about it. It's further from us than the moon, I think. And tremendously powerful. But it can't detect pure consciousness. Nor can an electron microscope detect it. Nor can a particle accelerator detect it. So all the instruments, scientific instruments cannot detect it. It's not an object to the senses. It's not an object to language. We just saw. Language you can't speak about it. You cannot even think about it. Why? All thoughts are illumined by that. By you, pure consciousness. But that cannot be illumined by the thoughts. Yo vetti sarvam nachayasya vetta. There is a hymn to Sri Ramakrishna which says, that which knows everything, but which is not known by anything. What is that? In Vedanta, that's the Atman, our real nature. But here in the hymn, it's referring to Sri Ramakrishna. Thereby, Sri Ramakrishna, Atman are the same thing. It's your real nature. So anyway, unthinkable. Unthinkable in the sense that it's not something tremendous that you can't even wrap your mind around. No, it's right there, but not in front of your minds. It's sort of, so to say, behind your mind. It is that which is looking at your mind. Not something that the mind can look at. Sarvatra-gam. It is that which is all-pervading. Whatever is it. Achintyañcha already mentioned. It cannot be conceived of. The three words are used. Kūṭa-stham, achalandhruvam. Kūṭa-stham, achalandhruvam. These are very beautiful, powerful words. Kūṭa-stham. It means that which exists in the middle of a heap. Kūṭa means a heap, a mass. Stha means established in. So it's used in multiple senses. One is the one which exists in the middle of, say, false witness is called kūṭa-sakshi. In the middle of falsity. So magician, the magic of the magician is not real, but the magician is real. The false witness is not real. I mean, what it said is not real, but the person who said it is real. In the midst of this magical display of Maya, where nothing is permanent, where nothing is ultimately real, it all comes and goes, every person comes and goes, every event arises and disappears, our own bodies arise, change and disappear, our thoughts come and go, perceptions, ideas, continuously, waking, dreaming and deep sleep come and go in an unending cycle. You might say, no, it comes to an end when you die, Swami. No, even life and death go on in an unending cycle. Nothing is stable here. And everything is on display. But to what? In what? That is called kūṭa-stham. There is something which shines forth as this magical display. The magical display of the universe is called kūṭa, the heap. And that thing which shines forth as all of this is called kūṭa-stham, that which is established unshakably in the middle of the heap. What's the heap? Your life. All your thoughts, all your achievements, your failures, your frustrations, your dreams, your hopes, your days and your nights, your waking, dreaming and sleeping. You're living and dying. In the midst of that, there is one unflickering light. That's you. That is kūṭa-stham. And that's not just in the middle of one life. It's in the middle of the whirling universe, in which universes appear, exist and disappear. Srishti, Sthiti, Pralaya. the cycle of the birth, existence and disappearances of the universe. What is that? It is kūṭa-stham, the one basis for all of that. The anvil upon which the goldsmith beats out and hammers gold into necklaces and bracelets and tiaras, and at the end of it the anvil remains exactly the same. Kūṭa-stham. Mountain top is called kūṭa. The top of a mountain is called a kūṭa. Imagine the top of a mountain. I've seen this in the Himalayas. It's an object of meditation in itself. I would sit and look up. The true giants are there. I was about 10,000 feet high there, and the other mountain peaks there were, 15, 16,000 feet, 18,000 feet. Beyond them were the true giants, 20,000 plus, 25,000 feet. But the ones I saw were somewhat higher than where the place I was sitting. And the mountain tops, completely bare of vegetation, sparkling with the snow on the top of the mountain there. And brilliant display of color during sunset. I have seen this also. At one time at the same time, on one mountain peak it was snowing, raining or snowing. Other mountain peak was brilliantly shining in sunshine. Come sunshine, come snow, hailstorms, the mountain peak stands tall. Come glaciers coming down, landslides, mountain peak stands tall. So kūṭa, what is that which stands tall in the midst of cataclysm? Kūṭa-stham, it's you. Then achalam, that which does not undergo birth, death. Chalam means moving. Achalam, unmoving. That which does not move through birth, aging, old age, disease, death. That which does not undergo the cycle of birth and death. This is the common paradigm we have in Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism. We are moving through many lifetimes. It says there is something that does not. You actually do not. That's the real you. And then achalandhruvam. Dhruvam means, see, these words are almost similar. Kūṭa-stham, achalandhruvam. You could translate all of them as stable, unmoving, solid, rock solid. Dhruvam is that which has its own inherent existence. Sthayi satta in Hindi. That which has stable existence. There's no time to explain this. This would require another 45 minutes, no TED Talk style. This is entirety of the 16th verse of 2nd chapter. Na sato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sata is packed into this word, dhruvam. That which everything has borrowed existence, that alone has intrinsic existence. It is existence itself. Think about water and waves. Waves come and go. Water does not come and go in that context. Think about the gold. Think about the gold and the ornaments. Ornaments, you can melt that same gold and make a new ornament out of it. But the gold remains gold all throughout. That is dhruvam. It has its own existence. All the ornaments depend upon that gold. All the waves depend upon that water. Everything in the universe depends upon that one being which you are. It's called dhruvam. How do we attain that? It is you. But what do we do to attain it? Next time, another TED Talk. That's verse number 4. We will see that next time. And then also see why it's difficult. And then he will make a transition into Bhakti Yoga. The rest of the chapter is a commentary on Bhakti Yoga, the practice of Bhakti. I have this talk coming up tomorrow. It's an online event. I'm going to talk about Bhakti Yoga. The topic is Bhakti Yoga, so my preparation is more or less good because this is the subject we're going to. But there's a stipulation. I have to speak in Odia, which is a language which I have not spoken for decades now, so I'll have to get used to it slowly. Yeah. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.